Well, hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg, here today to do another haul revisit. So my plan for this year, I mentioned in my March book haul and in the first haul revisit I did for the month of March, that I'm going to try to do some haul revisits, anticipating that I might not be able to do a whole lot of book hauls this year. I will actually have a book haul for this month, but so what I decided to do is I'm going to do the haul revisits in the first half of the month and then the haul at the end of the month. Assuming that there will be one. But that way, if there are months where there are two, they'll be kind of spread out, and there won't be just constant haul stuff. So let's get into it. In April of 2019, I brought in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books into my library. I did pretty well with the ones that I had brought into my library in March of 2019. I read half of them. Not so much in this case. I haven't read a single one of these books. So not a great track record. Let's go through them and see if they're things that might still be of interest to me. There were, by the way, 2 library books that I mentioned in that book haul. I did not read one, and I DNF'd the other. The DNF was Lot by Bryan Washington. I just couldn't really get into it, so I returned it to the library. And the one I did not read at all was Lost Children Archive by Valeria Luiselli. I returned it to the library, anticipating that I would get back on the hold list, and I just never got around to doing that. I still want to read Lost Children Archive, just haven't gotten around to doing it. So I will work on that. Hopefully, at some point, I will get around to it, especially if it does end up being eligible for the Pulitzer Prize and ends up winning it. We'll see what happens with that. So the first book that I hauled in March of 2019 was The Accidental Tourist by Anne Tyler. I picked up this used copy at my local library. I feel like Anne Tyler is an author I need to revisit in adulthood. I read Breathing Lessons, which won a Pulitzer Prize in the 80s. Somewhere around the time I was 19 or 20, and I hated it. But what Anne Tyler is really known for is celebrating the ordinary, making the kind of quote-unquote mundane things of everyday life elevated to a really wonderful artistic level. And maybe at some point I will probably reread Breathing Lessons as part of my Pulitzer Prize project. This was kind of like a supplement. I saw it. It's only hardcovers at my library are only on sale for $1, so I grabbed it. I'm also interested in watching the movie because it won an Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for Gina Davis. So let's really quickly just go over the plot. I'm going to skip a little bit. Okay, the protagonist is Macon Leary, and he's the prototype of the accidental tourist. He hates travel, which is why he is so singularly equipped to make his living as the anonymous author of a series of chunky, passport-sized guidebooks called Accidental Tourist, whose logo is a comfortable armchair with wings. And whose ideal reader is the businessman abroad who longs for a king-size beauty rest in Madrid, a taste of sweet and low in Tokyo, and a restaurant in Rome that will serve Chef Boyardee. Macon is someone who himself travels through life accidentally. Things just happen to him. He doesn't seek them out. His only child has been killed in a senseless accident. His wife, for no apparent reason, asks for a separation, leaving him to fend for himself. A broken leg conveniently thrusts him back home with his sisters and brothers in the family house where he started out. Surely it is an accident that he gets involved with the astonishing Muriel, the frizzy-haired, stiletto-heeled, non-stop talker who does the bookings at the kennels where Macon boards his unmanageable Welsh corgi Edward when he has to go on one of his fact-finding trips. But gradually what seems like accident is tinged with purpose, and the comfortably familiar is disturbed by the impulse toward escape. Now, I'm definitely going to hold on to this because I do think this seems to be where Anne Tyler's celebration of the quote-unquote ordinary details of life seems to be at its best, or at least it's most poignantly thematic. So I'm going to hold on to this. I'm still going to be interested in reading it, and I got it for $1, so it's not like I'm really out a whole lot on that one. I also got A Pale View of Hills by Kazuo Ishiguro. I've read 2 books by him and really loved them. I picked this one up because around that time I did the Choose the Year book tag, and I chose the year I was born, 1982, when this was published. And I had not known the plot of it, and once I knew the plot, I was really interested in reading it. That is the story of Itsuko, a Japanese woman now living alone in England, dwelling on the recent suicide of her eldest daughter. In a story where past and present confuse in a haunting and sometimes macabre way, she relives scenes of Japan's devastation in the wake of World War II, even as she recounts the weirdness and calamities of her own life. So this is definitely something I would still be interested in reading and would like to get to, because I've liked 2 of Ishiguro's books in the past, Never Let Me Go and The Remains of the Day. I think he's definitely an author I would want to keep around on my shelf, even if I haven't gotten around to reading it yet. And of course, he is a winner of the Nobel Prize for literature. So yeah, definitely still interested in this one. It's a slim volume, so hopefully I will manage to get around to it at some point. How many pages is it? Let's see, 183. So hopefully I can get around to that. But I haven't done it in a year, so we'll see. Then we have another one that's going to be a keeper. Spoiler alert. City Boy by Edmund White. My Life in New York during the 1960s and 70s. Edmund White is a kind of legendary LGBTQ author. He wrote A Boy's Own Story and books like that. I believe he got the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Book Foundation at the National Book Awards last year. This is groundbreaking literary icon Edmund White reflects on his memorable life in New York in an era when the city was economically devastated but incandescent with art and ideas. Recording his ambitions and desires, recalling lovers and literary heroes, White displays the wit, candor, and generosity that have defined his unique voice over the decades. Now, the reason I didn't get to this last year was because in June, I focused on LGBTQ books for Pride Month, and I read Dancer from the Dance by Andrew Holleran, which deals with the gay subculture in the 1970s, obviously a period before the AIDS crisis came about, and it deals with the same time period. And I kind of put this one off because I didn't want to get stuck in that era too much. Well, it's time. I think I'm going to try to read this in June this year, and make this one of the books that I get to for Pride Month this year, because I would really like to get to it. That is a period of time that I am very fascinated with, and would like to learn more about from somebody who was there firsthand. The other thing is I read The Stonewall Reader last year, so it wasn't just one book, it was two books that kind of tied into the same era. So I think I'm ready to revisit it now this year. And then we have another slim little volume. It's Attic by Katherine Dunn. I picked this one up on an impulse because I have read Geek Love by Katherine Dunn. Really, really liked it a lot. It's been a very long time since I read it. I should probably revisit it at some point. I don't know when I would ever get around to doing that. But it's something I should revisit because I loved it when I read it in my early 20s, but a lot of time has passed since then. And I had never seen another book by Katherine Dunn in a store. So I grabbed it. I didn't even really know that she had published anything else. So I was really interested in grabbing it and trying it. So here is the stunning debut novel from the acclaimed author of Geek Love. Attic follows a young woman named Kay who has joined a cult-like organization that sells magazine subscriptions in small towns. When Kay tries to cash a customer's bad check, she lands in jail, and Dunn's visceral prose gives us a vivid stream-of-consciousness depiction of the space in which she's held. As Kay comes to know the other inmates, alliances and rivalries are formed, memories are recounted, and lives are changed. Based on Katherine Dunn's own formative coming-of-age experiences, Attic was critically lauded when it was first published in 1970. Part of the reason I put this one off is that I didn't know that this book existed when I saw it in the bookstore, and I grabbed it completely on impulse. I didn't know anything about it. After I got it, I looked into it a little more, and a lot of the stuff I saw about it was fairly negative. And not in like a 1 star I hated this book kind of way. Like people seem to have some legitimate concerns or critiques of this book, and that really deprioritized it on my list. It doesn't take up a lot of space. I'd probably still be interested in reading it at some point, but it's not anything that's going to be a priority for me. I'm not rushing to get it. I'm not super curious to find out what another book by Katherine Dunn would look like or be like. So, I'm going to keep it. We'll see what happens and when I eventually get to it. And then the next one, Willa and Hesper by Amy Feltman. This one, it's funny because when I rewatched the video, which I will link down below, by the way, my haul video for the month of April 2019, I didn't remember what booktuber had mentioned this book, which made me pick it up, and I remember now. It was Mercy at Mercy's Musings. It's funny that I didn't remember then, but I remember now. Anyway, she had talked about this book on her channel, and I thought it sounded really interesting, so I ordered a copy. Here it is. Have not gotten around to reading it. Let's see. Willa's darkness enters Hesper's light late one night in Brooklyn. Theirs is a whirlwind romance until Willa starts to know Hesper too well to crawl into her hidden spaces, and Hesper shuts her out. Hesper runs, following her fractured family back to her grandfather's hometown of Tbilisi, Georgia, looking for the origin story that he is no longer able to tell. But once in Tbilisi, Cracks appear in her grandfather's history, and a massive flood is heading toward Georgia, threatening any hope for repair. Meanwhile, heartbroken Willa is so desperate to leave New York that she joins a group trip for Jewish 20-somethings to visit Holocaust sites in Germany and Poland, hoping to override her emotional state. When it proves to be more fraught than home, she must come to terms with her past, the ancestral past, her romantic past, and the past that can lead her forward. Told from alternating perspectives and ending in the shadow of Trump's presidency, Willa and Hesper is a soul-piercing debut that explores the intertwining past and present, queerness and coming of age in uncertain times. It still sounds interesting. I think the interesting thing, if I had it to do over, I probably wouldn't have ordered this. I probably would have waited to see if maybe I could get it through a library or like a library app or something like that. But it's an interesting thing to have. It's not like Attic by Katherine Dunn. It's not something that's going to be a priority for me to get to. But I'm still interested in the story. And one of my reading goals for last year was to read LGBTQ books that focused on the L, the B, and the T. And this kind of fit that. And I don't want to lose sight of that either. So I want to keep this around so I can focus on LGBTQ stories, but especially ones that feature lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or questioning stories as well, and this would definitely fit with that. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it, and I don't know when I'll ever get to it. Check in with my haul revisit in 2021 and we'll probably be having the same conversation. But yeah, I'm gonna hopefully keep it around and get to it. We'll see. Then if you watched my haul revisit from March, you saw that one of the books I had purchased then was Leading Men by Christopher Castellani, and I ended up DNFing that book. Interestingly, though, I picked up this book because of Leading Men. It's The Gallery by John Horne Burns, published by the New York Review of Books. Now, when I was reading Leading Men, it's about Tennessee Williams. He meets up with Truman Capote in Italy, and there's this guy named Jack Burns. I didn't realize at first that Jack Burns was an author that I had never heard of. And once I realized that, I kind of checked out his work and basically found out that The Gallery is kind of a quote-unquote forgotten classic, especially among LGBTQ literature. So I immediately ordered a copy, and here it is. So John Horne Burns served as a U.S. intelligence officer in North Africa and Naples during World War II. He returned from the war to write The Gallery, a bestseller that also earned the admiration of such writers as Edmund Wilson, Norman Mailer, and Gore Vidal. No other books succeeded so well in capturing the confused feelings of horror, cynicism, rage, self-loathing, and desperate inarticulate desire with which many Americans emerged from the war. Set in occupied Naples in 1944, The Gallery takes its name from the Galleria Umberto, a bombed-out arcade where soldiers and civilians come together in pursuit of food, drink, sex, money, and oblivion. A daring and enduring novel, and one of the first to look directly at gay life in the military, The Gallery surveys the devastated world left behind by what Paul Fussell calls in his new introduction to Burns's masterpiece, The Worst War in History. Gays in the military aspect was what had really, really drawn me to this. This was first published in 1947. So yeah, it just sounds really interesting. I would definitely still like to get to this book, and I'm going to keep it around. I don't know if I'll be getting to it in June when I do emphasize LGBTQ books for Pride Month, but it's definitely something I want to read at some point and will read at some point, I hope. And then the last one was Karamo, My Story of Embracing Purpose, Healing, and Hope by Karamo Brown. I mean, so sue me, I got it because I like the new Queer Eye. Hey. And I had a coupon at Barnes & Noble, so I picked it up. I have not gotten around to reading it. It's not something I would super prioritize. My husband actually just listened to this on audio and really enjoyed it. And he actually recommended that I do read it, but listen to the audio because Karamo obviously reads it himself. And he said it just really feels good to have him telling that story himself. So interesting to have the book when I may end up listening to the audio of it. So, when Karamo Brown first auditioned for the casting directors of Netflix's Queer Eye, he knew he wouldn't win the role of culture expert by discussing art and theater. Instead, he decided to redefine what culture could and should mean for the show. He took a risk and declared, "I am culture." Karamo believes that culture is so much more than museums and the ballet. It's how people feel about themselves and others, how they relate to the world around them, and how their shared labels, burdens, and experiences affect their daily lives in ways both subtle and profound. Seen through his lens, Karamo is culture. His family is Jamaican and Cuban. He was raised in the South in predominantly white neighborhoods and attended an HBCU. He was trained as a social worker and psychotherapist. He overcame personal issues of colorism, physical and emotional abuse, alcohol and drug addiction, and public infamy. He is a proud and dedicated gay single father of 2 boys, 1 biological and 1 adopted. It is by discussing deep subjects like these, he feels, that the makeovers on the show can attain their full, lasting meaning. Styling your hair and getting new clothes and furniture are important, but it's imperative that you figure out why you haven't done so in 20 years so you can truly change your life. And I think that's interesting. And actually, that was the takeaway that my husband had, and the part of it that he found really interesting. So I probably will read this, but not in this format. And then, depending on how much I like it, I don't know if I'll keep it around on my bookshelf. Update on the bookshelf situation. We did purchase a new bookshelf for me. I reorganized my books, and pretty much everything fit. So I don't need to do a massive unhaul. I'm thinking about still doing a sort of bookshelf tour, but I don't know. So I know I've been promising that all year. I don't. So I'm hoping I'll get to it at some point. It's just going to take a lot of time, and I haven't had a whole lot of time, even with everything going on. I'm still working full time, but I will find the time at some point. Anyway, that was a big fail in the reading department because of those books, I didn't read a single one, even the 2 from the library. I started one but DNF'd it, so not my best. Not my best. Hopefully the next one will be better, but we'll see. If you've read any of these and would recommend them or would recommend staying away from them, please let me know. You know what to do. Drop that comment down below. If you have other recommendations based on these or stories, anything like that, I would love to hear them as well. And as always, I hope you're staying well. Please stay safe, stay at home if you can. And as always, I really appreciate your time. And I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.